Welcome once again to our certified Christian counseling training. This is module 12, and we will be talking about ethics in Christian counseling. This is very important because uh, we ought to understand the guidelines and the standards that we must keep to in our practice of Christian counseling. In this module, we will see ethics codes and standards for Christian counselors. We will also consider common ethical dilemmas in Christian counseling. We will consider techniques for handling ethical issues. Let's start with basic scriptures on this subject. First Corinthians chapter 10 verse 31. The Bible says, whatever we do, whether we eat or we drink, we should do it all for the glory of God. That is the first standard and ethical guideline that we must follow as Christian counselors. That in everything that we do, the glory of God must be central to our art. Romans chapter 14 and verse 12, Bible says each of us will give an account of himself to God. So everything we do as Christian counselors, we should do it with a sense of responsibility that one day we will stand before God and give an account of what we have done as Christian counselors. Romans chapter 4, verse 15 says, where there is no law, there is no transgression. We understand that there are legal provisions for the practice of Christian counseling, and there are laws, that guide the practice of counseling in general. We must familiarize ourselves with these laws and make sure that we do not transgress against them. Overall, ethics in Christian counseling serves as a compass that guides us in our professional conduct. It serves like the compass that points us in the direction that we should go and ensures that our counseling relationship is grounded not only in ethical integrity according to the laws of the land, but also in Christian values and also the moral aptitude of respect. So these three streams are the areas that ethics cover as far as Christian counseling is concerned: the values of Christianity, the moral aptitude, and then ethical integrity. Now, why should we bother about ethics since we are Christian counselors? Number one, paying attention to ethics will help us to uphold our Christian values. Paying attention to ethics will help us uphold our Christian values. Christian counseling is grounded in the teachings and principles of Christianity. So, ethical conduct ensures that we align our actions and practices with the values of, love, compassion, integrity, respect, and all the other values exemplified by Jesus Christ and the early apostles. We need to bother about ethics because it protects the well-being of our clients. Ethical guidelines will give you a framework that will ensure the well-being and best interest of your client. So when you adhere to ethical standards as a Christian counselor, these standards give you a framework that helps you to prioritize the emotional, psychological, and spiritual welfare of the people that come to you for counseling, such that you are always working in their interest, working towards their growth, working towards their healing. Ethics also help us to maintain trust and confidentiality. Ethical principles will establish trust between you and the people that come to you because they know that you follow standards. You are not just doing whatever comes and is not, anything goes kind of thing. So it builds a measure of trust. People will feel confident that, you are professional in what you are doing, and they can trust you more knowing that their information and experiences they share with you will remain confidential, and you will treat it with utmost respect and privacy. They get that sense when they see that you are professional in what you are doing. Ethics or following ethical standards also guides us and helps us to respect autonomy and individuality. Ethical conduct generally will teach you how to recognize the importance of people's autonomy, such that when people come to you for counseling, for spiritual guidance, even if you have become their spiritual director, you can still honor and respect their unique perspectives, their beliefs, and their decisions, and foster an environment that promotes self determination and personal growth. If you do not follow ethical standards, you may not know when you shift from there to begin to want to control the lives of people that come to you or enforce your opinions on them. Ethical standards also help us to navigate complex issues, complex religious and spiritual issues. Because, in all honesty, as a Christian counselor, you will deal with sensitive issues, sensitive matters that bother on, spiritual issues, religious issues. It is adhering to ethical standards that will help you navigate these complexities in most cases, because you can, draw from these ethical standards to find guidance on exploring faith, religious beliefs, spiritual practices, while you remain client centered, because we are trying to be Christ centered, but at the same time people's lives are at stake. So again, you will come in contact with issues that will test how well you are skilled in maintaining biblical standards and remaining Christ centered while still putting your client in focus. Ethical standards will help you achieve this. Ethical standards will help you avoid harm and exploitation. It will safeguard your client from potential harm and exploitation, because you will be able to establish proper boundaries for that relationship, such that you will not fall into the trap of abuse or manipulation. You will do everything again in the best interest of your client. Ethical standards promote professionalism and accountability. Ethical guidelines that are set forth, will build an expectation for professional behavior. And that way, there is something to use as the baseline to hold you accountable in your practice, so that you cannot do anything you like and get away with it. The people that you are submitted to, the Christian counseling community that you belong to, can say, wait, this is not appropriate, this is not, a professional practice, or this is not ethical practice. So ethical guidelines will ensure that you engage in ongoing professional development, and you can seek supervision, maintain a high standard of competence. And finally, ethical standards will help you to reflect Christian witness. Because at the end of the day, ethical conduct in Christian counseling is supposed to be a reflection of your commitment to being a witness of Christ's love, to be a witness of Christ's grace. It allows you to embody Christian values in your interactions, modeling the transformation power of faith and compassion to clients and, the broader community that know you to be a Christian counselor. So it is for these reasons that we pay attention to ethics. It is for this reason that we must learn and master the ethical guidelines, codes of conduct that we must adhere to in our practice of Christian counseling. The foundation for ethics in Christian counseling is obviously Christian principles. They provide a strong ethical foundation for counseling practice. The teachings of Jesus Christ, as found in the Bible, the teaching of the early apostles, as found, in the epistles, they emphasize love, they emphasize compassion, forgiveness, justice, the inherent worth and dignity of every individual. You see, these are the baselines on which ethical guidelines for Christian counseling rest. They guide Christian counselors in our interactions with clients and inform our ethical decision making. So we must understand that biblical standards form the foundation for our ethical guidelines as Christian counselor. And we must not betray biblical guidelines for any other reason. Now, how then do we integrate these biblical guidelines into practice as Christian counselors. The integration of counseling ethics and counseling ethics and Christian principles involve harmonizing the values and the teaching of Christianity with professional guidelines set forth by the law or by regulatory bodies for Christian counseling. So we need wisdom to create a unified approach that acknowledges and respects both the religious and professional dimensions of our counseling practice. And in doing that, there are three things we must pay attention to. Number one is the respect for human dignity and worth. As Christian counselors, the ethics or the ethical guidelines that uh, that undergirds our practice involves or recognizes the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. Remember that all human beings are created in God's image. Whether they are believers or not, they bear the imprint of God on them. So this principle will guide us to treat every human, again, whether they are born again or not, we must treat them with respect, with empathy, with non-judgmental acceptance. We must value their uniqueness and honor their personal preferences. It is very important that we do that. And it is vital to emphasize that whether they are believers or not, whether they are born again or not, we owe them that as a duty to show them respect and to uphold their worth and dignity. Genesis 1:27 says that God created man in his own image. Next to that is a caring heart. The ethics that guide our counseling practice as Christian counselors emphasize the call to love and to care for others. That is why we want to, be trained as Christian counselors in the first place. So we are guided by the biblical commandment to love our neighbors as ourselves, to demonstrate compassion to those who seek our help. And again, we manifest this compassion, this love through empathy, providing support, understanding, and a genuine desire to alleviate suffering and to promote people's well-being. When you read the Bible in the book of Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2, the Bible tells us to bear one another's burden so that we can fulfill the law of Christ. So you must practice your counseling and bear it as a responsibility to carry other people's burden, to support them through their hard times, to alleviate their suffering, to promote their well-being, to genuinely care for them. There is this saying I always tell people that I train, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And true care starts from the heart. It doesn't start from what you do. It starts from your natural disposition. It's something that should flow naturally. So you respect all humans, you care for everyone, and next to that is to respect and adhere to the ethical standards and professional guidelines of counseling in general. Counseling profession has ethical guidelines that have been set forth. We must respect this while at the same time being guided by our Christian values. We must uphold the core principles of counseling ethics, things like confidentiality, informed consent, competence, cultural sensitivity, and all the others. Romans chapter 13 and verse 1. The Bible tells us very clearly that every soul must be subject to higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained by God. So, so long as what the guidelines and standards that are set forth do not contradict our Christian values, we have no excuse but to adhere to them. By integrating Christian principles with counseling ethics, we strive to provide a therapeutic environment that respects the clients, their values, their beliefs, while at the same time will adhere to professional ethics and standards without betraying our own faith. That way, we can foster a holistic approach to counseling that recognizes the spiritual dimension of human beings and seek to promote their healing and growth, that helps seek to help them flourish within the framework of Christian values. What are the counseling ethics that we find in the Bible? Since we are saying that at the base of uh, ethical guidelines as Christian counselors are biblical standards, Christian values. What then are these values? Number one value is love. It is the foundational principle of Christian ethics. Love. Bible tells us that God is love. Luke chapter 10 verse 27. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Number two is truthfulness. Christian counselors are called to uphold the truth, promoting honesty and integrity in their interaction with everyone, clients, colleagues, and the community at large. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 25, the Bible tells us to put away falsehood and we should speak the truth, for we are members one of another. Next to that is justice and fairness. Christian ethics emphasize the pursuit of justice and fairness all the time and in all aspects of life, including counseling. As Christian counselors, we are called to advocate justice, to advocate equity and equal treatment for all individuals. Micah chapter 6 verse 8. Bible says he has told you, oh man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. Do justice all the time without compromise. Next to that is compassion and empathy. Compassion and empathy. We must demonstrate compassion and empathy towards others, sharing in their pain, sharing in their struggles, sharing in their joys, offering them support when they need. First Peter chapter 3 verse 8, Bible says we should have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. These must become integral parts of our practice as Christian counselors. Forgiveness and reconciliation is another counseling ethic from the Bible. As Christian counselors, we must recognize the importance of forgiveness, the importance of reconciliation, and we must facilitate healing and restoration in with by encouraging people to forgive and to reconcile, both to forgive people who hurt them and to forgive themselves, and even to seek God's forgiveness where they have done wrong or made mistakes. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 32. Be kind to one another, tender hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. It doesn't matter how much people have been hurt by whoever. One of the things you must encourage as a Christian counselor is forgiveness. These are biblical foundations that provide the ethical framework for Christian counselors. It must guide your actions, it must guide your attitude, it must guide your decision making process in your counseling practice. How about codes of conduct beyond what the Bible says now? What are the codes of conduct, the professional standards that we must adhere to? Confidentiality and privacy is the first. As Christian counselors, we are bound by ethical principles to maintain confidentiality and protect the privacy of our clients. We must ensure that any information or disclosures that we get from people during counseling sessions must remain confidential, except in situations where you are under legal obligation or ethical obligation to discuss. We are going to talk about that later. But beyond that, whatever they say to you must remain with you. I was informed that someone asked the question about uh, uh, you- giving examples, maybe during seminars or ministrations or preaching, using examples of what people discussed with you in confidence. I wouldn't say it is altogether wrong, but I have three rules I always give people for that. Number one, don't avoid as much as possible giving such examples in a place where people know who you are talking about. Because some people are smart, they will piece what you are saying together. So you must be careful that even if you are giving such examples, try as much as possible that it will not be in a place where the person is known. Number two is, in giving such examples, be as vague as possible. Don't give too much specific details. Be as vague as possible. And then number three, give it time. There are several examples to use. Sometimes it is better, don't give an example, using somebody's situation when that matter is still ongoing. Give it time, give it time. But remember, don't give specifics, don't mention names, and specific details. Be as vague as possible, and as much as lies within your power, don't give such examples in a place where the person can be known, such that anybody that is even trying to guess who it is will most likely guess wrong. So maintain confidentiality and privacy. Next is competence and professionalism. Christian counseling ethics emphasizes the importance of professional competence and ongoing development. Counselors are committed to maintaining the necessary knowledge, skills, and ethical standards to provide effective counseling services, and Christian counselors must do the same. Third is the issue of boundaries and dual relationships. Christian counselors must establish clear boundaries and avoid dual relationships when it can compromise the counseling relationship or create conflict of interest. You must maintain appropriate professional boundaries to ensure the well being of your client and the integrity of the counseling process. Next to that is cultural sensitivity. We must be sensitive to difference in culture. I remember mentioning this in one of the previous models. Be very sensitive, and close to that, number four is number five, non-discrimination. Don't discriminate against anyone. Respect and value people's diversities, their cultural backgrounds, their beliefs, their experiences, seeking to provide counseling services that are sensitive and appropriate to their individual needs. Don't discriminate, and be sensitive to people's cultural backgrounds. It is very, very important. Is an important part of Christian counseling code of conduct. Informed consent is another code of conduct that we must adhere to as Christian counselors. Ensure that your clients have a clear understanding of the counseling process, have a clear understanding of the nature of your relationship with them, understand the goals and the methods you are using for their counseling, understand if there are potential risks, benefits, are there limits to confidentiality, let them know, so that whatever they do, they are well informed. Next to that is the duty to report. Duty to report. You must know when you are under obligation to report. And in such cases, please make sure you do the needful. For instance, if you suspect child abuse, you are under obligation to report. The issue of confidentiality does not cover that. It's a legal requirement. Rather, it's an ethical requirement. You must report. When there are threats of harm to self or to others, for instance, somebody who is suicidal, or somebody who is trying to take revenge or whatever, they confide in you, say, as I'm living here, I'm going to kill him. You should understand, in such cases, you are under obligation to report. Recognize the appropriate authority to report to and report. Sometimes it is you should report to the police. Sometimes you report to social workers or whatever, but recognize the appropriate professionals to report to and do so. Next to that is the duty to refer. Sometimes you may need to refer people that come to you to appropriate professionals, or lead them to the right resources when the need exceeds your scope of expertise. For example, if you are dealing with a mental health situation, please refer the person to medical professionals or to secular therapists who can help, while you maintain a Christian counseling relationship with the person. It doesn't mean you refer and you answer off. No, refer while you still maintain a Christian counseling relationship. And finally, ethical decision making. Christian counseling ethics involve a thoughtful and ethical decision making process, especially when you are faced with complex situations or ethical dilemmas. Counselors must consider relevant ethical guidelines, sometimes consult with colleagues, superiors, or supervisors. Sometimes you even need to seek spiritual guidance so that you can make decisions that prioritize the well-being and the best interest of your client without violating the law or compromising your faith as a Christian. So we've talked about the biblical framework. We've talked about professional codes of conduct. Now let's talk about the standards of practice. You must understand that standards differ from place to place. So please familiarize yourself with the standards that obtain where you intend to practice. This is very, very important. Familiarize yourself with the standards that obtain where you intend to practice. Three areas to consider: competence and qualifications. Competence and qualifications are crucial to Christian counseling practice. They ensure the provision of effective and ethical counseling services that uphold professional standards and contribute to the overall well being of people. So, in the context of Christian counseling, you must become competent by acquiring necessary skills, necessary training. So, for instance, following this course thus far is building confidence, but beyond that is qualifications. And qualifications differ from place to place. In some places, you must have a postgraduate degree in counseling for you to practice counseling. So there are guidelines for qualifications before you can practice counseling. But then, as Christian counselors, we situate our practice in the context of the separation of church and state. So, in many states, for instance, in the US, Christian counselors are exempt from state license. In most cases, a state license will require that you have maybe a master's or a doctorate degree in counseling from a secular school, for instance. But as being a seminary trained counselor and a Christian counselor in many states of the United States, you will enjoy exemption from state license due to the law of separation of church and state. But these laws differ from place to place. In many states, yes, Christian counselors are exempt from state licensure. However, some states still require that Christian counselors will obtain a state license. That is why, like I said earlier, you must familiarize yourself with the standards that obtain where you intend to practice. The exemption based on separation of church and state recognizes the unique role of faith based counseling and allows counselors to provide services within the context of their religious beliefs. So, again, in some states, the law says you must get a state license, which would require that you have a master's or PhD in psychology. In some other states, many states of the US, you are exempted because you are providing faith-based counseling. Now, in some of the states that exempt Christian counselors from state license, there are still specific regulations that govern Christian counseling. Some states have strict rules, like Christian counselors cannot charge a fee, for instance. Whereas in some states, such rules do not apply. Familiarize yourself with what applies in your country and with what applies in your state. But as a seminary, we are authorized to train faith based counselor and to certify and to license them. Understanding the rule and the law where you intend to practice should guide you in choosing a licensing title. Carefully consider the legal and regulatory landscape when you are selecting a counseling title. If you reside in the United States, based on legal advice, we have been told that the safest licensing title for a seminary trained counselor is licensed counseling minister. However, there are other licensing titles: licensed Christian counselor, licensed biblical counselor, licensed faith based counselor. Please be sure when you are choosing a licensing title that where you intend to practice, such titles will be without issues. So familiarize yourself with standards of practice. Familiarize yourself with standards of practice. Adhere to them, uphold them in your practice as a Christian counselor. Now let's talk about some of the ethical dilemmas that you may face as a Christian counselor. Some of the ethical dilemmas you may face as a Christian counselor. Disclosure of sinful behavior. A man comes to you who is cheating on his wife, confides in you. You may face an ethical dilemma. Should you keep quiet about it, or, you know, talk about it? So you may face a dilemma between confidentiality and disclosure of sinful behavior. In most cases, what you should do is keep quiet, but encourage the person to take the necessary step. Tell the person they need to open up and all, but don't do it on their behalf. Another ethical dilemma you may face is conflicting religious beliefs and values. Conflicting religious beliefs and values. When your personal religious beliefs and values clash with those of your client, ethical challenges may arise in respecting the person's autonomy and providing unbiased support while staying true to your own convictions. For example, if you are counseling an unbeliever, I tell people, if you counsel an unbeliever, still counsel them from the biblical point of view, but respect their autonomy. You cannot force them. Some Christian counselors will say if they are not ready to give their lives to Christ, do away with them. You cannot counsel them because you are counseling from a biblical point of view. I disagree with that approach. I tell people, keep them as close as possible. Let them know your stand, but remain available to them so that the day they need somebody to talk to and the day they need or the need arises that they want to run to God, they know they can always talk to you. So stay relevant in their lives. Don't push them away, but make sure you stay true to your conviction and you share those convictions with them. Dual relationship with church members is another ethical dilemma. Because, for instance, if you're a pastor, you already have pre-existing relationships with many of people you will counsel when they are members of your church. So now you have to navigate the boundaries of counseling relationship and maintain objectivity. Because when you already have a pre-existing relationship, it may be difficult for you to be objective. So that can also be an ethical dilemma. Emotional attachments and maintaining boundaries can also be an ethical dilemma. For example, when you develop emotional attachment or you become overly involved with a client, when you begin to see that happen, you must establish and maintain appropriate boundaries immediately. Evangelism and conversion, especially in dealing with unbelievers now. Because when unbelievers come to you and they need counseling, it is very easy that you look away from the problem in their life or the issues in their life, and you begin to talk to them about the need to give their lives to Christ. What you should do instead is to incorporate evangelism into the counseling process, not to leave the counseling process and start doing evangelism. It is more effective when you integrate the two. But again, that can also uh, 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 be an ethical dilemma. Sensitive topics, handling sensitive topics can also create an ethical dilemma. For example, sexual issues with the opposite sex. See, that can create an ethical dilemma. How you are going to provide unbiased support on sensitive topics while you adhere to scriptures and to dictates of the Bible, navigating potential conflicts between teachings of the Bible and the needs of your client also. Someone has gotten pregnant out of wedlock, and this person is contemplating abortion, and this is, for instance, a 14-year-old girl, daughter of a pastor. Uh, you may not know that by the time you start talking to the girl, the instincts of, for example, a mother, a father, or whatever may kick in, and you may think, for the benefit of this child's future, the best thing is to abort this thing. While that may look like a good deal, you must still adhere to the teachings of the Bible. Don't prioritize the needs of the client above Bible teaching. And how are you going to now convince them to say, no, don't abort, while you show them Christ's love, knowing that this is going to be a long-term issue because pregnancy lasts for 9 months, right? See, so these are sensitive topics. Sexual orientation is also a sensitive topic in some parts of the world. So someone comes to you, two people come to you who are gay, and they say they need relationship counseling. You see, that's a sensitive topic. I know many people will say, oh, I'll turn them down. No, don't turn them down. But at the same time, in such cases, you do not provide Christian counseling, because it is impossible to provide Christian counseling in such a sinful relationship. What you do is sit them down, share your convictions with them calmly and in love, and explain why you may not be able to take up their case, and pray with them and dismiss them. That is a better way than to be dramatic and say, no, I rebuke the devil, get out of. No, that is not how to handle. So sensitive topics can create an ethical dilemma. Informed consent for spiritual practices. An ethical dilemma may arise when incorporating spiritual practices into counseling, because you may need to obtain informed consent from clients, ensuring that they understand the purpose, the risks, and the potential benefits of such practices. This is important in countries where they have a strong legal process. For instance, as a Christian counselor, if you are telling somebody to fast, you must explain to them why you are telling them to fast. You must explain to them the risks associated with fasting and how to navigate those risks. Explain to them the benefits that they stand to gain. Because you may just tell a client, you see, I'll recommend that you fast for 3 days and all of that and all of that. And the person fasts and, has maybe ulcer after a while, and they sue you to court. It can happen. So, again, informed consent, duty to report can create an ethical dilemma. We've talked about that earlier. Things like child abuse, child neglect, and all sorts may require you to file a report. That can also create an ethical dilemma. Involvement in legal or court cases, when the court requires you to provide testimony on a matter, you must carefully consider your role. You must think about confidentiality and potential conflicts of interest. But then when the law requires you to disclose information, you would have to do so. So that can also create an ethical dilemma. Continuing education can also create, an ethical dilemma, because you will encounter ethical challenges in staying current with the best practices, in engaging with continuing education, in ensuring professional competence that meets the current guidelines, where you can now balance responsibilities with obligations. So these are ethical dilemmas you can face in your practice of Christian counseling. Now, how do you handle these ethical dilemmas? How do you navigate when you encounter an ethical dilemma? Self reflection is one. Examine your values, your biases, your ethical beliefs, identify potential ethical conflicts, make necessary adjustments to align your practice with ethical standards. Reflect on yourself. Consultation and supervision is another technique. Seek consultation, seek supervision from more experienced counselors. This will provide an opportunity for you to discuss, your ethical dilemma, gain insight from those who have more experience than you, receive guidance on how to navigate complex ethical issues, and foster your own professional growth in the process. Establishing frameworks for ethical decision making can also help navigate dilemmas. Develop a framework such as ethical codes, biblical principles, professional guidelines that will guide your decision making process, such that you are considering relevant factors while you are making ethically sound choices. It's not anything that comes to your mind. You run whatever decisions you are making through the frameworks that you have established. Communication with clients can also help navigate ethical dilemmas. Have an open and honest communication with your client about ethical considerations, about boundaries, about the counseling process in general. That way you promote transparency, mutual understanding, of the expectations, from the counseling process, and of your Christian values too. Respecting diversity will also help navigate ethical dilemmas. Respect cultural diversity, respect the autonomy of the people that come to you. They have a right to make their own decisions. And you must consider cultural factors that may impact their understanding of ethics and the counseling process in general. When you understand and you respect that, you are not likely to run into trouble. And even if there is trouble ahead, you'll be able to navigate it more easily. Finally, seek legal or ethical advice as needed. When you are faced with complex ethical issues, talk to legal practitioners, ask for legal advice, ask for ethical advice from professionals or organizations that are knowledgeable in the field. That way, you can be sure that you are complying with legal requirements and with ethical guidelines. And you save yourself from unnecessary trouble. You save yourself from unnecessary trouble. These are the techniques that you can use, in handling ethical issues or ethical dilemmas. Again, please remember uh, that as a Christian counselor, you owe it as a duty to stay true to biblical standards and to respect professional standards at the same time. Don't compromise your faith while you keep focus on your counselor, or on your client rather, and don't violate the law or ethical standards. May the Lord help you as you do this in the name of Jesus. I round off with Ecclesiastes chapter 10 verse 10, where Bible tells us that wisdom is profitable to direct. Faith is good, anointing is good, Skill is good, but you must be wise in your practice of Christian counseling. You must be wise in your practice of Christian counseling. Counseling can be a very delicate field, and in some countries, it can be a high risk practice because a lot of people are seeking to nail you. A lot of people, unregenerate minds, come for counseling and then blame you for the outcomes in their lives because you were the one who counseled them. I have seen and read and uh, uh, found many cases like that, legal cases and all. So keep asking God for wisdom while you do your best, to stay true to biblical values and ethical standards. Thank you for listening. One more time, this is Springboard Theological Seminary. If by chance you stumbled on this video and you wish to officially enroll for our certified Christian counseling course, please send an email to springboardseminary@gmail.com and we will gladly enroll you. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that you can receive notifications for new lectures and also for subsequent training programs that we will run. Drop your comments. Let me know where you have listened to this lecture from and how you intend to apply it in your practice of Christian counseling. God bless you. See you again in the next module.